What's up, team? This is Ro, your best friend at JMSB. So here I was asked a question for ECON 203, Introduction to Macroeconomics. Let's have a look. So here's a post from Aviva Smith. Here it says, suppose your research has uncovered the following demand and supply functions for an economy. We're offered AD and AS, where AD is P equals 150 minus 0.1 Y, and AS is P equals 30 plus 0.1 Y. In required A, we're asked to draw the AD and AS functions and to illustrate the equilibrium. So in our market diagram, we're going to illustrate an upward sloping AS function. Realize that AS is going to have a y-intercept of 30, and that's simply because when y is 0, we can see that the price level would be at 30. The AD curve is going to be downward sloping. The y-intercept of AD is simply going to be 150, and the x-intercept is going to be at 1500. The way that I calculated this 1500 is simply by dividing 150 by 0.1. So 150 divided by 0.1, that's 1500. That's how you get the x-intercept of the graph. The sweet spot in your market diagram is where AD and AS intersect, where they essentially touch each other, and this is what determines the equilibrium. So for required A, we simply want to show off AS and AD and this equilibrium point. Let's have a look at required B. Here it says, what are the short-run equilibrium values for real GDP and the price level from the graph above? Let us also assume that this short-run equilibrium is also the long-run equilibrium, that is y equals yp. Now, in order to find the equilibrium values, we can either observe them directly from the graph, or we can simply equate the aggregate demand curve to the aggregate supply curve. And that's because this is the short-run equilibrium condition, that AD and AS have to equal each other. So if I were to equate the two functions, setting AD equal to AS, we're able to bring all the constants onto one side and the variables onto the other. So I can argue that 150 minus 30 is equal to 0.1 Y plus 0.1 Y. So on the left side, we'll have 120. On the right side, we'll have 0.2 Y. If we divide both sides by 0.2, we can solve for the equilibrium GDP. So the equilibrium real GDP, or Y star, should be at a value of 600, or 120 divided by 0.2. Once we figure out the equilibrium real GDP, now we must simply plug this back in, either into AD or AS, in order to solve for the price level. And notice that whether you plug it into AD or into AS, you should be getting the same answer. And so the equilibrium price level that I'm getting is 90. Let's look lower down at required C. Here it says, suppose a fall in demand for new houses reduced the investment component of aggregate expenditures and reduced AD at each price level by 300. Draw the new AD curve in the graph above. So in order to save us some time, I have redrawn the graph here, and all we want to show is that AD is shifting by 300 at every single price level. And so all that's going to happen is that our AD curve is going to have a revised x-intercept at 1200, and that's simply because at every price level, including a price level of 0, the AD has fallen by 300. And so on our graph, we essentially want to show a shifted AD curve along with the revised equilibrium. Notice that the revised equilibrium implies a lower price level and a lower level of output. And so we can argue that there's a recessionary output gap. Let's have a look at required D. Here it says, complete the following paragraph. To conclude, the fall in AD due to the reduced investment component of aggregate expenditure will create a recessionary output gap. And that's simply because AD is now going to be weaker than what is needed at the long-run equilibrium, which will cause the unemployment rate to rise or increase relative to the natural rate. So this is characteristic of a recessionary output gap. Whenever we are in a recession, the actual unemployment rate is likely to be higher compared to the natural unemployment rate. If the government wants to close this gap, it should blank government spending and blank taxes. So at this point, we're talking about discretionary fiscal policies. The problem in the goods market is that there isn't enough spending. And so if the government wanted to fix that, they should either increase government spending or they should cut or lower or decrease taxes. If the central bank wants to close this gap, they can change interest rates by decreasing them or lowering them. If neither the government nor the central bank responds to the gap, input costs such as wages will eventually decline or fall, and this will cause the aggregate supply curve to shift to the right in order to close this gap. This process, however, may take a very long time to complete. So there we have it. Those are the options that I would put in the blank spaces. Now the truth is, I really like this question simply because it does a good job at summarizing the key concepts that you're going to be faced with in this course. This course is primarily based on fixing output gaps. And this paragraph essentially talks about all the ways that an output gap could be eliminated. One way is when the government changes stuff, which is called fiscal policies. A second way is when the central bank makes an adjustment, which is called monetary policies. And a final way is automatically, through automatic stabilizers. So I hope that explanation helps, and if it does, make sure you tag your friends that are taking Econ 203. Be sure to share this video in other groups, and if you want to check out all the videos that I have for your class, you can check them out at my YouTube channel, Ask Ro, or on my website, askro.org. In the meantime, guys, keep well, study well, Ro out.